Hey, I'm Lorna and welcome back to my channel Thread and Yarn. This episode is another Fibre Folk episode, and these are slightly different from my other videos. Often in my other videos I show you the things I'm working on, knitting, sewing, quilting, but in these episodes I talk to you a little bit about folklore, often linked to fibre arts, which is a huge passion of mine, and I quite like to knit during them, and I hope you bring a little cosy project as well. This one I'm going to be talking a bit about Halloween or Samhain and a tiny bit of the history and mythology involved in that. Just a very brief little cosy overview. And also I've put together a group of Halloween inspired knitting patterns. Some of them are quite spooky, others are just generally autumn inspired. So I am certainly not going to be casting on any or finishing them in time for Halloween, but I just thought it'd be fun to show you a few of the ones that have been on my list for a while, or some that I think are kind of fun and exciting. And maybe I'll start making some throughout the year and have some to show you for next autumn. But I'm just feeling all inspired at this time of year, and there's so many lovely cosy knitting patterns out there, and I thought they would make a nice pairing with this video. So join me for a short little video if you fancy hearing a bit more about Samhain and see what I'm knitting, bringing your knitting project along and seeing some of the spooky autumnal Halloween inspired knitting patterns. So I do these episodes because I think historically we've done so much crafting together in the past, especially in these like autumn and winter darker nights. I think people would have been gathered around the only source of light and warmth in their houses and would have been working on group projects or mending things for the home. And I think that knitting and crafting together, quilting together, whatever it is, it's just so lovely to have a group of like-minded people with you, or people who are working on other projects and can make you all excited about yours or new ideas. And I love creating that kind of community feeling. So I try to view this as my like digital fireside, where people who are interested in similar things can come and join along, knit along with me, and join in the comments. Hopefully tell me what you're working on and things that have inspired you. If you've got any stories about Halloween in particular, I'd love to hear them. Halloween has always been my favourite time of the year. It's by far my favourite holiday. I try not to put too much pressure on it because I can get very excited, and I try to enjoy some of the Halloween spirit and general love for October and autumn all year around. One of the ways I do that is I grow most of my own food, but squash and pumpkins are my absolute favourite thing to grow. I don't think it's just because they are associated with Halloween. They're also absolutely brilliant sources of food. They're pretty easy to grow and they look gorgeous. They cure on my windowsill and then they sit there probably from now until April time. So they're just brilliant food. Here are a few of them. I've got about 50 throughout my house. I've gone a bit mad this year. But I love picking out the varieties and growing them and just getting really excited for knowing that they're going to be decorating my windowsills and knowing all the lovely, delicious squash and pumpkin flavoured things that we're going to cook. And generally, I just quite like listening and reading about folklore and sort of gently spooking myself throughout the year. I think, as I said before, there's a huge connection between coziness and spookiness, and that is the level of horror that I quite like to enjoy. Nothing like absolutely mortifyingly terrifying, nothing about that's like really overly gory or violent, just a gentle spook. And yeah, that's the kind of vibe that we're going to go for today. So what I'm working on, what I've brought with me is, you may have seen in some of, if you've watched any of my videos about what I'm making at the moment, this is the scallop jacket. I can't remember who the designer is, but I'll put it up in the description. I'm nearly there. So last time I spoke to you about it in my October update, I had just got some circular, oh dear, there goes a needle. I just got some circular needles to carry on going with the sleeve. It was much quicker, so I've done one sleeve now and I've started on the other. So I'm doing the first bit in double pointed needles like I did on the other sleeve so that it matches, and then I'm going to switch to circulars. But I'm really keen to get this done. I think it's going to be a lovely cosy jumper for autumn and winter. So I'm going to be knitting on this. I'd love it if you brought along another craft, or do whatever you want to do. Just chill out. Somebody was ironing or folding laundry last time. It's just supposed to be a kind of relaxing, peaceful, little, hopefully community-inspired video with spooky Halloween element today. So I'm just going to pick up my needle so I can get knitting. So Samhain is the ancient Gaelic name for the 31st of October and sort of into the 1st of November. And it marks the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the winter. It's about halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. And it's one of those sort of liminal times of year. We see others throughout, it's a bright bit of sunlight, not very autumnal. We see others throughout the year, like there's Beltane in spring, and this one in autumn, Samhain. It feels like it is the transition point between the longer days, the season, the half of the year where things are growing, where we're producing things, where we're gathering in all the fruits of our labour, the harvest, and preparing for the dark half of the year. Now, for many people, this might feel quite distant or ancient, old-fashioned. How is it relevant to life today? And I think even if you're not growing your food, or even if you're living in a city and not feeling the connection to the seasons as much, or to the sort of harsh weather that you can get when you're quite rural, there's so many ways that you can notice these changes through the year, and I think it can be quite meditative and therapeutic. I know I've always found that. I think there's so many different ways where you can go and appreciate that in local parks, or just going out for a walk and noticing what's around you. I always used to think there was a smell in the air when autumn came. That kind of first cold morning, or around here I can smell people's fires starting, and even in the city when I used to live in London, you just notice that first cool breeze and get all your knits out. And I just think there's something really magical and special about that transition. God, the sunlight is very bright. Sorry if you're struggling to see me. Hopefully that's a bit better. And these liminal times of year, I think they could be felt by us sort of wherever we are in the country, but I think they're also quite magical. And historically and in folklore, it was the time when all sorts of mysterious and spooky things could occur. That liminality and transitional period in the seasons provided a window of opportunity for the otherworldly realm to be part of our own. And at no point in the year is that stronger than on All Hallows Eve and Samhain. Some of our traditions about Halloween all stem from the folklore and mythology around this liminality. So trick-or-treating, for example, or guising, was originally inspired by disguising yourself from the fairy folk who could be out prowling the streets, looking for ways into your home, causing mischief, or old spirits, ancestors, or darker spirits. It's obviously led on to modern trick-or-treating, which can be absolutely fun in its own way, and is probably how I fell in love with Halloween to begin with. But I love learning about the sort of ancient roots of these modern practices, and also some of the things that perhaps have been a little bit more forgotten about. there's so much Irish mythology about this time, and a lot of it stems from the changing in the weather and the changing of the growing year that I've just mentioned. But I won't go into all of it now, but there's so much you can read about with different myths and legends and Irish folklore. It seems to have been associated with feasts, and I think some of that is because of the end of the harvest season when you've got everything in. All the animals have been brought down from the fields, all of your vegetable crops have been collected, and it's a time of celebration. It's a time of seeing everything that you've worked towards this year. But also there's an element of fear there. So while you might be comforted by seeing that your harvest has worked and hopefully you've got enough food to get you through the winter, you don't know what's coming in the darker months. You hope that you've got enough to get you through, but there's definitely an element of uncertainty. And I think in modern times, even though we feel the changes of the seasons less keenly because we have supermarkets and we don't have to rely on all of our efforts through the summer, we can still listen to some of our natural instincts that perhaps can be difficult to follow in modern life. I mean, thinking about how animals hibernate and how they slow down, I like to try as much as possible to emulate that in my life and slow down the number of busy projects that I'm doing through the warmer months, and really just bring an element of coziness and nurturing a period of, like, as much as possible, like relaxation and calm and rebuilding and recovering from the busier, warmer times of the year. No matter what it is, even just something small like making a cake or having a bubble bath or just carving out an hour in my day to just sit and knit snuggled up in a quilt. Just little like self-caring things. I think they're a nice way to recognise that we're in the darker half of the year and it's a time to recover and mend not just our clothes but also our bodies and our minds, because we've just ended up being in this constant cycle where we're supposed to be performing at 100% all the time, and there's no natural sort of ebb and flow allowed in modern life, really. I'm starting to drift off topic, and I don't want this to be a bit of a lecture about modern life, but I think this time of the year and this liminal festival always make me think of things like that. So at Samhain, the spirits and the fairies were appeased by us leaving out offerings for them, and doing this meant that people could survive the winter. Offerings of food and drink were left outside the houses for them. It was a time where spirits were no longer entirely dead. Places were set for them at the dinner table or by the fire, in this belief that the souls of the dead can come home on this one night of the year can be found across so many different cultures. But what they often share is the spirits and otherworldly beings having access to our world again for this one night of revisiting their homes or perhaps mischief. So seeing as I'm so in love and obsessed with pumpkins, I thought the story I could tell you today could be about how we think jack-o'-lanterns came into our terminology and how it came to symbolise Halloween. So there's an old Irish myth called Stingy Jack, which has been written into poems and stories since in the 1800s. And it's believed that this is the origin of the idea of the jack-o'-lantern. So there was an Irishman called Jack, known as Stingy Jack because he was not particularly kind and was known as a deceiver and manipulator and was often tricking people so that they would lose out on things and it would be to his gain. Now, he had a well-known reputation of this, and it was so bad that even the devil heard of it. And one night when Jack was stumbling back from the pub, as he often did, have to look out when that sounds like me at least once a month. And one night when he was stumbling back, he came across a body with a dishevelled and mischievous face. Only the devil could be something that gruesome. He thought his time had come and the devil had come to collect his evil soul, which was the devil's intention. Sneaky, sneaky Jack said to the devil, before you take my soul, can you please buy me a round of drinks at the local pub? And the devil thought, why not? Back they went to the pub. Jack drank and drank, and when it was time to leave, he asked the devil to pay. The devil was quite surprised, obviously, but also didn't have any money on him. So Jack convinced him to turn himself, the devil, into a silver coin to pay the tab. The devil agrees, and as soon as Jack has the coin, he puts it in his pocket, where there's also a crucifix, and traps the devil. Now Jack keeps the devil trapped like this, and eventually the devil makes a bargain with him for his freedom. So if Jack will release him, he won't take Jack's soul for another 10 years. So Jack agrees, and out comes the devil. And Jack continues deceiving and drinking and just being Jack for another 10 years. And then the devil comes to collect his soul 10 years later. Now Jack says, oh, now I'm done for, and says to the devil, before you take my soul, can I just fill my empty belly with an apple? The devil agrees again, which makes me wonder about how sneaky the devil is. But he agrees, and the devil even goes up the tree to pick an apple for Jack. And then Jack surrounds the bottom of the tree with crucifixes again. This guy is just ready and prepared. And the devil agrees to never take Jack's soul to hell if Jack will release him. So Jack obviously agrees, and then the devil never comes to collect his soul. Eventually, though, Jack dies, and he's never going to get into heaven because of his behaviour, and he can't get into hell because that's the bargain he made with the devil. So Jack wanders the liminal plane, the space between heaven and hell, for eternity. And it's pretty dark, so he carries around with him a hollowed out turnip with a candle inside. Now, originally, at least in Ireland, the original jack-o'-lanterns weren't pumpkins not being something native to the British Isles. They carried around hollowed out turnips. So seeing a turnip used as a lantern at that time of year was not entirely uncommon, so you can see how that would work its way into this tale. It was only later, when Halloween moved to North America, they began to be used as modern jack-o'-lanterns and associated with Halloween. But I quite like this little tale of mischievous Jack, and it also conjures up this spooky image of a man wandering through the dark for the rest of eternity with this little hollowed out turnip, which must have been quite difficult to do. I feel like pumpkins are much easier to hollow out, having the seedy centre and make much more natural lanterns than a solid turnip. But personally, I hate turnips. I would never grow them, so that is the only use I could think of them for, apart from adding to my compost. But there you go. There's a tiny little myth for Halloween, Stingy Jack. It may be one you've known already. It's one I've heard of many times, but I think is a nice little spooky tale just to get you in the mood for Halloween, which is coming up in, I think it's a week today from me filming this. So I'm excited. We're planning on watching a couple of silly old films. So I've never seen The Cat People, and I'm really looking forward to watching it. And I think if we've got it in us, we're going to watch The Curse of the Cat People afterwards, which is its sequel. It's got terrible Rotten Tomato reviews, but who cares? I think it's going to be fun. sort of silly horror. So I'm looking forward to that. We've watched a couple of silly ones lately, like last night we watched Horror Express, which had a very, well, relatively to how I know him, young Christopher Lee, and it was hilarious. You have to watch it if you haven't seen it already. There's a sort of alien crossed with a yeti, crossed with a werewolf, crossed with a thing with laser eyes tearing up a train. So check it out if you haven't seen it before. It's hilarious. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you enjoy your Halloween. But there's something else I want to share with you, some spooky goods. So there's a couple of patterns. I haven't knit any of these before, but I would love to. And I just thought I would share them with you. Ask if any of you have knitted them, and just talk through some spooky knitting inspiration. So number one is the Underwing knits. That's by Erica Heusser. So I've got some notes here because I'll never remember all the names otherwise. They are this beautiful like moon and moth patterned fingerless mitt. It's got colour work. It looks gorgeous. It's got a kind of autumnal woodlandy vibe, but definitely spooky with the moth and the moon as well, and especially in the black and white colourway. I love them. I think they look so magical. I would really, really like to cast these on at some point this winter. So that's my first one. Second one is the Shortcut to Mushroom socks by Anna Sjosvard. And she is doing a collaboration with Wool and Twine. They're doing some sock boxes, which I think are coming out on the 27th of October. They go with the pattern. I don't know if I'm going to treat myself to a whole sock box because I feel like I probably treated myself too much lately. I'm going to see what I've got in my stash and if I can make that pattern, but that's something I'd love to do. It's got these little toadstooly mushrooms on. I think it's super cute. The name Shortcut to Mushrooms as well. It's got Lord of the Rings theme, which is my favourite thing ever. I think my favourite movie series, favourite books. Just obsessed with Lord of the Rings. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, I must. And it's just not really spooky, unless you think of the mushrooms as poisonous, but definitely autumnal, and I really would like to make those. So, also, one I have made, Look at My Holes by James and Watts. This is originally a top pattern. It's a mesh. I made a very summery version in the Madder dyed tencel, but Forest Charm has made a black dressed version, which is so cool and looks like a cobweb. Gosh, the light is all over the place today. Looks like a spider web, and it's super spooky. It's really effective in the black. So I've put a picture up and you can see what you think, but I'm quite tempted to do a dark version to my light. Although I did say I'd never knit mesh again and it was a nightmare, so maybe not. If you like mesh knitting, maybe it's the one for you. Now, similar to the Underwing knits are the Moonlit Magic mitts. I love these as mitts, but Craftswoman L on Instagram knit a sock version using this pattern around the sort of ankle of the sock, and they were so gorgeous. So I think if I got this pattern, I would probably knit a pair of socks instead. I think they were really beautiful, loved them, and definitely spooky. I mean, all of these can be made year round. It's just that I love surrounding myself in particular with spooky, cozy, autumnal things at this time of year to celebrate what is absolutely my favourite time of the year, my favourite holiday. I know that it is for a lot of you as well, and I assume that part of that is because we just feel really excited to knit and create. At this time of year, it's just a bit more comfortable when it's not boiling hot, and it's kind of inspiring to think of all of the lovely things you can make to keep yourself warm through the colder, darker half of the year. So I hope you enjoy your Halloween, or if you don't celebrate, just enjoy this beautiful time of year where the colours are changing on the trees, where the winds become a bit colder, where we can slow down and enjoy those darker nights and really look after ourselves and enjoy working on our projects. I hope you're able to build that into your life a little bit. I'm sure many of you do already. I'm going to try and do more of that because I have a tendency to try to be productive all the time and it's not always helpful. So I'm trying to slow down and really savour and look around me and go outside more. I spend a lot of time on my allotment. I also want to just do more walks, notice the temperature in the air, the smells around me, notice how the leaves change colour from day to day, see what little creatures are out, and generally surround myself in the fantasy world that I live in my head. So I hope you have a really cosy, spooky end to October and start to November and enjoy this liminal time of year. Thanks for joining.